The scorching Nevada sun beat down mercilessly as Madeline Alcott stood alone at Ely Trading Post, her belongings piled in a small heap beside her. Sweat trickled down her temples while she watched the cloud of dust from the departing stagecoach grow smaller, taking with it her last chance of continuing to California. Abandoned by the man who had promised to marry her, she clutched her reticule tightly, counting the meager coins that remained of her savings. It was 1876, and at 22 years old, Madeline found herself stranded in a town she'd never meant to visit for more than a passing hour. $2.35, she whispered, closing the clasp with a quiet click. Not enough for a room, not enough for passage, barely enough for food. The betrayal stung deeper than the heat. Frederick had convinced her to leave her position as a schoolteacher in Boston, promising a new life in San Francisco. Now he was gone along with her trunk, containing most of her possessions and money. The trading post bustled with activity around her. Cowboys and miners moved in and out of the establishment, casting curious glances at the well-dressed Eastern woman standing forlornly beside her single valise. The proprietor had already made it clear she couldn't linger indefinitely. "Madam, I'm closing up in an hour," he'd warned. "You'll need to figure something out by then." Madeline straightened her spine, trying to formulate a plan. Perhaps she could find work in town until she saved enough to continue her journey or return east. Her education might secure her a position as a teacher, though she had no references here. The very thought of approaching strangers for employment made her stomach twist with anxiety. As she contemplated her dire situation, the trading post door swung open. A tall man stepped through, his face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Unlike the rough miners who dominated the town, he carried himself with a quiet confidence. His clothes, though dusty from travel, were well-made dark trousers, a blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and a leather vest. When he lifted his head, Madeline caught her breath at the intensity of his gaze scanning the trading post. The moment his eyes found her, something shifted in his expression. Recognition, relief, and something else Madeline couldn't name flashed across his sun-bronzed face. He strode directly toward her, boots striking the wooden floor with purpose. "Miss Alcott?" he asked, his voice deep and tinged with a Western accent. Madeline took a step back, alarmed that this stranger knew her name. "Ah, yes," she stammered. "How do you—" The man removed his hat, revealing tousled dark hair and eyes the color of summer sage. "I've been looking for you," he said simply. Those 5 words hung in the air between them, and Madeline felt a strange flutter in her chest, equal parts fear and inexplicable hope. "I beg your pardon," she managed. "I don't believe we're acquainted, Mr. Yates Donovan." He extended his hand but withdrew it when he saw her hesitation. "I apologize for startling you. Your father sent me." "My father?" Madeline's voice rose in disbelief. Her father had passed away 3 years ago, leaving her with no family and forcing her to make her own way in the world. "Sir, that's impossible. My father is dead." Yates Donovan's expression softened. "I meant your godfather, Edward Pearson. He received your letter about traveling west to marry. When you stopped writing, he grew concerned and hired me to find you." He reached into his vest pocket and produced a folded paper. "I have his letter here." Madeline's hands trembled as she accepted the document. True enough, it bore Edward's familiar penmanship, the closest thing to a father she'd had these past 3 years. Her eyes scanned the words quickly, confirming that Edward had indeed sent this man to ensure her safety. "Frederick abandoned me," she admitted, her voice small. "He took most of my money and continued to California without me. I'm stranded." Yates's jaw tightened. "That explains why I couldn't find you in San Francisco as expected." He glanced at her single bag. "Is this all you have left?" Madeline nodded, humiliation burning her cheeks. "I planned to find work here until I could afford passage east again, but—" She gestured helplessly at the trading post. "I don't even have enough for lodging tonight." For a long moment, Yates studied her, his gaze not unkind but assessing. Finally, he nodded as if coming to a decision. "Miss Alcott, I was hired to find you and ensure your safety. I intend to honor that commitment." He looked around the trading post. "I have a ranch about 20 miles from here. I can offer you proper accommodations until we determine your next steps." Alarm bells rang in Madeline's mind. "I couldn't possibly. My housekeeper, Mrs. Hodgson, lives at the ranch," he added, correctly reading her concern. "Your reputation would be entirely secure, and I can send a telegraph to Edward tomorrow informing him that you've been found." Madeline hesitated. She had few options. Night would fall soon and she had nowhere to go. This man seemed honorable enough and he had Edward's letter still. "How do I know I can trust you?" she asked directly. A slight smile touched Yates's lips. "You don't. But Edward trusted me enough to find his goddaughter, and I've spent 6 weeks tracking you across half the country." He gestured toward the door. "The alternative is to remain here with no money and no prospects in a mining town not known for its hospitality towards stranded ladies." Put that way, the choice seemed clear. Madeline took a deep breath. "Very well, Mr. Donovan, I accept your offer of assistance, but I insist on working to earn my keep until I can return east." "Fair enough," Yates agreed, bending to lift her valise. "Can you ride?" "I learned as a girl," she admitted, "though it's been some years." "Then we'd better get started. It'll be dark in a few hours, and I'd rather reach the ranch before nightfall." As they stepped outside into the relentless Nevada sun, Madeline squinted against the brightness. The main street of Ely stretched before them, lined with saloons and businesses catering to the silver miners who sustained the town's economy. Yates led her to the hitching post, where 2 horses waited, a magnificent chestnut stallion and a gentle-looking bay mare. "This is Penny," Yates said, gesturing to the mare. "She's even-tempered and won't give you any trouble." Madeline approached the horse cautiously, letting the animal sniff her hand. "Hello, Penny," she murmured, stroking the mare's soft muzzle. Yates secured her valise to his saddle and then helped Madeline mount. The side saddle felt unfamiliar after so many years, but her body remembered the basics. "Ready?" he asked, swinging effortlessly onto his own horse. Madeline nodded, though in truth, she felt anything but ready. She was placing her fate in the hands of a stranger, heading into the unknown Nevada wilderness with only the word of her godfather as assurance. Yet as they rode out of town, the buildings giving way to sagebrush and open sky, she felt an unexpected sense of liberation. Perhaps, just perhaps, being abandoned at the trading post wasn't the disaster she had initially thought. The journey to Yates Donovan's ranch proved more arduous than Madeline anticipated. Having spent the past weeks in stage coaches and trains, her muscles protested the hours in the saddle. The landscape around them transformed as they traveled stark desert, giving way to juniper-dotted hills, and then into a greener valley nestled between mountain ranges. "Your ranch is quite remote," Madeline observed as the sun began its descent, painting the western sky in vibrant oranges and pinks. "That's why I like it," Yates replied. "I prefer the quiet, and the water access makes it valuable land." "How did you come to own such a place?" she asked, curious about her rescuer. Throughout their journey, he had been polite but reserved, answering her questions directly but volunteering little about himself. Yates adjusted his hat, shielding his eyes from the setting sun. "Served in the war. Afterward, I worked as a scout for the army, then saved enough to buy the land 5 years ago." His tone suggested there was more to the story, but Madeline didn't press. "And now you find lost Eastern women for concerned godfathers," she said, attempting levity despite her exhaustion. A smile flickered across his face. "Not typically. Edward and I have business connections. When he mentioned his goddaughter might be in trouble, I offered to help since I was heading to California anyway." Before Madeline could inquire further, Yates pointed ahead. "There it is." The valley opened before them, revealing a substantial ranch house nestled against a backdrop of cottonwood trees. A creek wound its way past the property, and several outbuildings surrounded the main house. Horses grazed in a nearby pasture, and smoke rose steadily from the chimney. It was surprisingly civilized for such remote country. "It's lovely," Madeline said honestly. "It's home," Yates replied simply. As they approached, a middle-aged woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her expression of surprise quickly transformed into welcome. "Mr. Donovan, we weren't expecting you back so soon." Her eyes widened at the sight of Madeline. "And you've brought company." Yates dismounted and moved to help Madeline down. His hands were strong and steady at her waist, and for a brief moment she was acutely aware of his proximity. He stepped away quickly, turning to the housekeeper. "Mrs. Hodgson, this is Miss Madeline Alcott. She'll be staying with us for a while." He briefly explained the circumstances of their meeting. Mrs. Hodgson clicked her tongue sympathetically. "Abandoned by her intended. What a scoundrel!" She gave Madeline a motherly pat on the arm. "Well, you're safe now, dear. Let's get you inside and settled. You must be exhausted." The ranch house was far more comfortable than Madeline expected. Rustic but clean, with solid furniture and touches of refinement that suggested Yates Donovan was a man of some means and taste. Mrs. Hodgson showed her to a pleasant bedroom with a window overlooking the creek. "Supper will be ready shortly," the housekeeper said, setting Madeline's valise on a cedar chest. "There's water for washing up, and I'll bring you a cup of tea in the meantime." Left alone, Madeline sank onto the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. That morning, she had awakened in a cramped stagecoach, blissfully unaware that Frederick planned to abandon her. Now she found herself in a stranger's home, miles from civilization. Yet, despite the uncertainty of her situation, she felt safer than she had in weeks. After washing away the dust of travel and changing into her last clean dress, Madeline made her way to the dining room. Yates stood as she entered, his trail clothes exchanged for a clean shirt and vest. His dark hair was damp from washing, and without the layer of dust, she could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30. "Miss Alcott," he nodded. "I trust the room is satisfactory." "More than satisfactory, thank you," she replied, taking the seat he offered. "I'm grateful for your hospitality, Mr. Donovan." Mrs. Hodgson bustled in with a platter of roasted chicken, followed by a young Mexican woman carrying side dishes. "This is Maria," the housekeeper explained. "She helps me with the cooking and cleaning." The meal was simple but delicious, especially after weeks of roadhouse fare. Throughout dinner, Madeline felt Yates studying her when he thought she wasn't looking. His gaze was thoughtful rather than intrusive, but it unsettled her nonetheless. "Mr. Donovan," she said finally, setting down her fork, "I meant what I said about working for my keep. I was a teacher in Boston. Perhaps I could teach the local children while I'm here." Yates exchanged glances with Mrs. Hodgson. "The nearest families are quite scattered," he said. "But your education could be useful. I've been keeping records for the ranch, but I'm no accountant. If you're willing, that might be a place to start." "Of course," Madeline agreed, relieved to have a purpose. "And tomorrow I'd like to send a telegram to Edward, letting him know I'm safe." I've already drafted one, Yates said. I'll have Miguel ride into town with it first thing. After dinner, they moved to the parlor where a fire took the edge off the desert night's chill. Mrs. Hodgson brought coffee, and for a while they spoke of inconsequential things: the weather, the ranch's operations, news from the east that Madeline had brought with her. It was almost normal, almost comfortable, and Madeline found herself relaxing slightly. "If I may ask," she ventured during a lull in the conversation, "how did you track me from Boston to Ely? It seems an impossible task." Yates set his coffee cup down, considering his words. "It wasn't easy. Edward knew you'd be traveling to San Francisco via Chicago. I started there, asking at hotels and stagecoach offices. Found witnesses who remembered a young woman matching your description traveling with a well-dressed man." His expression darkened. "In Denver, I learned your companion had been boasting about a wealthy Boston bride and spending freely. The trail led to Salt Lake, then south." "You're remarkably skilled at finding people," Madeline observed. "I tracked deserters during the war," he said simply. "People leave signs whether they know it or not." Madeline shivered slightly, though the room was warm. "And yet Frederick managed to disappear with my belongings." "He won't get far," Yates assured her. "I've sent descriptions ahead to contacts in California. If he attempts to sell your valuables, we'll know." "I'm more concerned about my mother's locket than the money," Madeline admitted softly. "It was the only keepsake I had of her." Yates's expression softened momentarily. "I'll do what I can to recover it." As the evening grew late, Madeline's exhaustion became evident. Mrs. Hodgson insisted on showing her back to her room, leaving Yates alone by the fire. Before departing, Madeline turned to him. "Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Not many would have gone to such lengths for a stranger." He met her gaze directly. "You're Edward's goddaughter. That makes you someone worth finding." That night, despite her comfortable bed, Madeline slept fitfully. Dreams of being abandoned, of running through endless desert, plagued her until dawn. When she finally rose, the sun was already streaming through her window. She dressed quickly in her second-best dress, feeling guilty for oversleeping on her first day. Downstairs, she found Mrs. Hodgson in the kitchen, kneading bread dough with practiced hands. "Good morning, dear. There's coffee and eggs keeping warm for you," the housekeeper greeted her. "Mr. Donovan's been up since before dawn, checking on the herd. He said to tell you he'll show you the accounts after lunch." "I should have risen earlier," Madeline fretted, accepting the plate of food. "I'm not accustomed to sleeping so late." "Nonsense. After what you've been through, you needed the rest." Mrs. Hodgson patted her hand. "Eat up now. Then I thought you might like to see around the place." After breakfast, the housekeeper gave Madeline a tour of the ranch house and grounds. The operation was substantial besides cattle. Yates raised horses and grew enough crops to sustain the household. 6 ranch hands lived in a bunkhouse near the barn, and Maria and her husband Miguel had a small cabin nearby. "It's larger than I expected," Madeline commented as they walked back toward the main house. "Mr. Donovan has worked hard to build it," Mrs. Hodgson said proudly. "When he bought this land, there was nothing but a shack and some broken fences. Now look at it." "He seems an unusual man," Madeline ventured. "That he is," the housekeeper agreed. "Quiet but fair. The men respect him. He doesn't talk much about his past, but I gather it wasn't always easy." Before Madeline could inquire further, she spotted Yates riding toward them, accompanied by another rider. As they drew closer, she recognized the second man as the trader from Ely. "Miss Alcott," Yates greeted her, dismounting. "Mr. Wilson here brought news I thought you should hear directly." The trader removed his hat, nodding respectfully. "Madam, seems your former traveling companion returned to Ely late last night asking questions about you." Madeline's heart skipped. Frederick came back. Why? Said he'd made a terrible mistake leaving you behind, Wilson explained. Claimed he went ahead to secure lodgings and returned to find you gone. Offered a substantial reward for information on your whereabouts. That's absurd, Madeline exclaimed. He abandoned me deliberately. Yates's expression was grim. Mr. Wilson didn't reveal your location, but others in town saw us leave together. It won't take Carruthers long to figure out where you are. What could he possibly want? Madeline wondered aloud. Perhaps he regrets his actions, Mrs. Hodgson suggested. Or perhaps, Yates said quietly, he discovered something in your belongings that makes you more valuable than he initially thought. A chill ran down Madeline's spine. There's nothing of significant value except, she stopped abruptly, remembering, my father's letters. They're in a false bottom in my trunk. The letters contained details about mining investments her father had made before his death, investments that Edward had been trying to locate for years. Yates's expression sharpened. That would explain his sudden change of heart. He turned to the trader. Mr. Wilson, I'd appreciate if you'd return to town and keep an eye on Carruthers. Let me know if he heads this way. After Wilson departed with promises to send word, Yates guided Madeline to his study, a modest room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a desk covered in papers. If Carruthers believes those letters are valuable, he won't give up easily, Yates warned, closing the door. You should prepare yourself for the possibility that he might come here. I'm not afraid of Frederick, Madeline insisted, though her racing heart suggested otherwise. He's a coward at heart. Even cowards can be dangerous when money is involved. Yates leaned against his desk, arms crossed. Tell me about these letters. Madeline explained what she knew, that her father had invested in several silver mines before his death, but the documentation had been misplaced. Edward had been searching for proof of ownership for years, suspecting the investments might be worth a considerable sum. Frederick must have found the letters and realized their potential value, she concluded. But he would need me to claim any inheritance, as the mines were in my father's name. Yates nodded slowly, which explains why he's suddenly so eager to find his lost fiancé. His voice held a note of disgust. For now, it's best if you remain at the ranch. We'll send word to Edward about these developments. As Madeline left Yates's study, her mind whirled with this new information. The idea of confronting Frederick again filled her with dread. Not because she feared him physically, but because his betrayal still stung. She had believed his professions of love, had trusted him with her future, only to discover it had all been a calculated deception. That evening, after a quiet dinner, Madeline found herself drawn to the porch. The Nevada night was spectacular velvety darkness studded with stars brighter than she had ever seen in Boston. The air carried the scent of sage and distant mountains, and the gentle sounds of night creatures created a peaceful symphony. She was so absorbed in the beauty of it that she didn't hear Yates approach until he spoke. It's something, isn't it? The sky out here. Madeline started slightly. It's magnificent. I've never seen so many stars. He leaned against the porch railing beside her, far enough away to be proper but close enough that she could sense his presence. In the city, it's easy to forget how vast the universe is. Out here, it's impossible to ignore. They stood in companionable silence for several minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Mr. Donovan, Madeline said finally, may I ask you something personal? He glanced at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. You can ask, I might not answer. Why are you helping me, truly? A telegram to Edward would have fulfilled your obligation. Yates was quiet for so long that Madeline thought he might not respond. When he did, his voice was low and reflective. I know what it's like to be abandoned, he said simply. To have the future you counted on disappear in an instant. The vulnerability in his admission caught Madeline off guard. "The war?" she asked gently, partly. He shifted, looking out at the darkness. "I had a wife once, Emily. She came west with me after the war, full of dreams about our future, but Nevada wasn't what she expected. The isolation, the hardships." He paused. "One morning I woke to find her gone, returned east without a word." "I'm sorry," Madeline said softly, understanding now his reaction to her situation. "It was years ago." His tone suggested the wound had healed, though perhaps not completely. "But when Edward told me about you, about your journey west to marry," he shrugged. "I suppose I wanted to ensure another Eastern woman didn't find herself stranded in a place she never chose to be." The honesty of his answer moved her. "Thank you for telling me." He nodded once, then straightened. "It's getting late. You should rest. Tomorrow we can work on those accounts I mentioned." "Good night, Mr. Donovan," she said, but lingered a moment longer, watching as he walked toward the barn, his silhouette gradually swallowed by the darkness. Over the following days, Madeline fell into a routine at the ranch. Mornings were spent helping Mrs. Hodgson with household tasks, while afternoons found her in Yates's study, organizing his chaotic bookkeeping system. The work was satisfying, and she discovered she had a talent for bringing order to the ranch's financial records. Yates himself was often absent during daylight hours, tending to ranch matters. When their paths did cross, their interactions were cordial but reserved. Yet Madeline found herself increasingly aware of him, noticing the way sunlight caught in his dark hair, how his eyes crinkled slightly when amused, the gentle way he treated the horses and spoke to his men. A week after her arrival, Madeline was sorting through a stack of receipts when Yates entered the study, his expression troubled. "Miguel just returned from town," he said without preamble. "Frederick Carruthers has been asking specific questions about this ranch and about me. He's been in the saloons, drinking heavily and making accusations." Madeline set down her pen. "What kind of accusations?" "That I've kidnapped his fiancé, that I'm keeping you here against your will." Yates's jaw tightened. "He's trying to rally support to come out here." "That's absurd." "I'm here by choice." Indignation flared in Madeline's chest. "Anyone who speaks to me would know that." "Men like Carruthers are good at twisting facts," Yates said grimly, "and he's found sympathetic ears among those who resent my success or hold grudges against me. What should we do?" Madeline asked, suddenly afraid not for herself, but for the trouble Frederick might cause for Yates and the ranch. Yates paced the small room. "We could ride to Ely together, have you publicly refute his claims." He shook his head. "But that might play into his hands, giving him access to you." "There must be another solution," Madeline insisted. "Perhaps if we—" She was interrupted by a commotion outside. They hurried to the window to see a cloud of dust approaching from the direction of town. As it drew nearer, they could make out a group of riders, at least 6 men, with Frederick's distinctive figure in the lead. "They're here," Yates said grimly. "Stay inside. Let me handle this." "No," Madeline countered firmly. "This concerns me directly." "I won't hide while you face Frederick's lies." Their eyes met in silent battle of wills. Finally, Yates nodded. "Very well, but stay behind me until I've assessed the situation." They stepped onto the porch just as the riders pulled up in the yard. Yates's ranch hands emerged from various buildings, sensing trouble. Miguel appeared at Yates's side, rifle in hand. "Donovan," Frederick shouted, his usually impeccable appearance disheveled from travel and drinking. "I've come for my fiancé." "Miss Alcott is here of her own free will," Yates replied evenly. "And from what I understand, any engagement between you has been thoroughly dissolved by your actions." Frederick's face flushed with anger. "You've poisoned her against me, Madeline darling. he called, spotting her behind Yates. "I've come to take you to California as promised. There was a terrible misunderstanding." Madeline stepped forward, ignoring Yates's restraining hand. "The only misunderstanding, Frederick, was my belief in your character. You abandoned me at that trading post and stole my belongings. There is nothing more to discuss. You see, gentlemen," Frederick turned to his companions, "she's been brainwashed by this rancher." He spat the word like an insult. "Madeline, think of your father's wishes, the plans we made." "My father would have been appalled by your behavior," Madeline retorted. "And I suspect your sudden concern has more to do with the letters you found in my trunk than any affection for me." A murmur ran through the men accompanying Frederick. Several exchanged uncertain glances, clearly beginning to doubt the story they'd been told. "I don't know what lies Donovan has filled your head with," Frederick blustered, "but I've come to take you home. If you won't come willingly—" "You'll what?" Yates stepped forward, his voice dangerously quiet. "Threaten a woman, force her to leave against her will. That sounds more like kidnapping than what you've accused me of, Carruthers." The tension in the yard was palpable. Frederick's hand drifted toward his waistband, where Madeline could see the outline of a pistol. "Don't," Yates warned, making no move toward his own weapon. "Look around you, Carruthers. My men are watching from every corner of this yard. If you draw, it will be the last mistake you ever make." Frederick hesitated, his eyes darting around at the ranch hands positioned strategically throughout the yard, many with rifles casually but purposefully displayed. "This isn't over," he snarled. "That woman is my fiancé, and those papers are rightfully mine." "The papers belong to Miss Alcott," Yates replied calmly, "and she has made her wishes clear. I suggest you return to town before this situation deteriorates further." One of the men with Frederick, an older gentleman with a sheriff's badge pinned to his vest, cleared his throat. "Seems to me the lady's spoken her piece, Carruthers. You told us she was being held against her will. That don't appear to be the case." "She doesn't understand what she's saying," Frederick insisted desperately. "Donovan has filled her head with lies." The sheriff dismounted, approaching the porch slowly with his hands visible. "Madam, I'm Sheriff Taylor from Ely. Are you being coerced or threatened in any way by Mr. Donovan or his men?" "Absolutely not, Sheriff," Madeline stated firmly. "I'm here as a guest, awaiting funds from my godfather in Boston to continue my journey. Mr. Donovan rescued me after Mr. Carruthers abandoned me at the trading post, taking most of my belongings including valuable family papers." The sheriff nodded, turning back to Frederick. "You heard the lady. She's not being held against her will. As for those papers and belongings, that sounds like a matter for the law." He gave Frederick a hard look. If Miss Alcott wants to file theft charges, she'd be within her rights. Frederick's face contorted with rage. "This isn't over," he repeated, wheeling his horse around. "You'll regret this, Madeline." With that parting threat, he spurred his horse and galloped away, leaving his confused companions behind. After a moment of awkward silence, the sheriff tipped his hat. "Miss Alcott, Mr. Donovan, I apologize for the disturbance. If you need anything from the law, you know where to find me." As the group departed more sedately than they had arrived, Madeline felt her knees weaken with relief and delayed fear. Yates was beside her instantly, guiding her to a chair on the porch. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle. She nodded, trying to control her trembling hands. "I never thought Frederick could be so dangerous." "Desperation makes men do foolish things," Yates observed, his gaze following the retreating figures, "and the promise of money even more so." "Do you think he'll come back?" she asked. Yates considered for a moment. "Not with a posse now that the sheriff knows the truth, but alone, possibly." He met her eyes directly. "I won't let him harm you, Madeline. You have my word." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected warmth through her. "Thank you, Yates," she replied softly, deliberately returning the intimacy. Something shifted between them in that moment, a barrier lowered, a distance bridged. As they sat together on the porch, watching the dust settle in the yard, Madeline realized that somewhere in the past week, this remote Nevada ranch had begun to feel more like home than anywhere she had lived since her father's death. That night, Madeline couldn't sleep. The confrontation with Frederick had unsettled her more than she cared to admit. His threats echoed in her mind, and every creak of the house made her start. After hours of tossing and turning, she rose and wrapped a shawl around her nightgown, intending to make her way to the kitchen for some tea. The main floor was dark except for a faint light coming from Yates's study. Madeline hesitated, then moved toward it, drawn by the knowledge that she wasn't the only one awake. She found him at his desk, a lamp burning low, a glass of whiskey at his elbow as he studied what appeared to be a map. He looked up at her soft knock on the open door, surprise registering on his features. "Madeline, is everything all right?" "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, remaining in the doorway. "I saw your light." Yates rose, gesturing to a chair. "Would you like to join me? I can't offer tea, but—" He held up his glass questioningly. Madeline hesitated only briefly before entering. Propriety suggested she should return to her room, but she found she craved company more than she cared about convention. "Just a small one," she agreed. He poured a modest amount into a clean glass and handed it to her. The whiskey burned pleasantly as she sipped it, warming her from the inside. "Frederick's visit disturbed you," Yates observed, resuming his seat. "Yes," she acknowledged. "Not so much his presence, but the hatred in his eyes. I never saw that side of him before. Men like Carruthers are good at concealing their true nature when it serves them," Yates said. "It's only when they're thwarted that the mask slips." Madeline traced the rim of her glass thoughtfully. "I was so certain he loved me. How could I have been so blind?" "Love makes fools of us all," Yates replied softly. "We see what we wish to see." His words held the weight of personal experience, reminding Madeline of the wife who had abandoned him. "You're Emily," she ventured carefully. "Did you see the signs before she left?" For a moment, she thought she had overstepped. Yates stared into his whiskey, his expression closed. Then he sighed. "In retrospect, yes. Her unhappiness was evident in 100 small ways, but I was too focused on building this place, on proving myself. I told myself she just needed time to adjust." "That wasn't your fault," Madeline said gently. "Perhaps not entirely," he conceded, "but I bear some responsibility. I brought her to a life she never wanted and expected her to embrace it." "And yet you've created something beautiful here," Madeline observed, glancing around at the comfortable study, thinking of the thriving ranch beyond its walls. Yates looked up, meeting her eyes. "You think so? Even after spending your life in Boston?" "Especially after Boston," she replied honestly. "There's an authenticity here that I find refreshing. Everything is exactly what it appears to be. Except for men like Frederick Carruthers," Yates said with a slight smile. "Well, he wasn't from here," Madeline pointed out, returning his smile. "He was as Eastern as I am. And yet you seem to be adapting quite well to Nevada." There was a question in his observation, one Madeline wasn't sure she was ready to answer. She took another sip of whiskey instead. "I've always been practical. When circumstances change, one must adapt or be miserable, and I've had enough misery for one lifetime." They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily between them. Yates told her stories of the ranch's early days, of the challenges he'd faced and overcome. Madeline shared memories of her father and her life in Boston. Neither mentioned Frederick again, nor the uncertain future that awaited resolution. When Madeline finally rose to return to her room, she felt calmer than she had since the confrontation. At her door, she paused, turning back to Yates, who had escorted her upstairs. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." He reached out, hesitated, then gently tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. The brief contact sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with fear. "Good night, Madeline," he murmured, his voice low. "Sleep well." After he left, Madeline pressed her fingers to the spot he had touched, wondering at the strange, fluttering sensation in her chest. It was different from what she had felt with Frederick, less desperate, more grounded, and infinitely more frightening. The following week brought significant changes to the ranch routine. A telegram arrived from Edward, expressing relief at Madeline's safety and outrage at Frederick's behavior. He promised to send funds for her return journey, but also included an intriguing postscript. "Investigating value of your father's mining interests. Initial findings promising. Await further instructions before deciding your next move." "It seems the letters might indeed be valuable," Madeline told Yates as they sat on the porch that evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains. "If only Frederick hadn't taken them." "We might be able to recover them," Yates suggested. Sheriff Taylor mentioned Carruthers is still in Ely, drinking heavily and spending freely. "If he's using your money, that's theft. Even if we recovered the letters, I wouldn't know how to proceed with the mining claims," Madeline admitted. "Father never taught me about business matters." Yates was quiet for a moment. "I know something about mining operations," he said finally. "Before buying this ranch, I worked claims in California and later consulted for investors. I could help you navigate the process." Madeline studied him, surprised. "You continue to reveal hidden talents, Mr. Donovan. Is there anything you haven't done?" A smile touched his lips. "I've never taught school to proper Boston children. I imagine that requires more courage than facing down angry miners." His teasing made her laugh, a sound that had become more frequent during her time at the ranch. "I assure you, it has its hazards. Tommy Wilkins once put a frog in my desk drawer." "The horror," Yates said with mock gravity, "clearly more terrifying than the grizzly I encountered in the Sierras." Their easy banter was interrupted by the sound of approaching hooves. Both tensed, memories of Frederick's visit still fresh, but it was only Miguel, returning from town with supplies and mail. "Senor Donovan," Miguel called as he dismounted. "Important news from town." "The man Carruthers, he has been arrested." Yates strode to meet him. "Arrested? For what?" "Fighting in the saloon. He pulled a gun on a miner who accused him of cheating at cards." Miguel handed Yates a folded paper. "Sheriff Taylor sent this for Miss Alcott." The note was brief but informative. Frederick was being held in the Ely jail, and during the arrest, the sheriff had confiscated a trunk that Frederick claimed was his property. Upon inspection, they had found women's clothing and papers with the Alcott name. The sheriff requested Madeline come to town to identify her belongings. "This could be our opportunity to recover your letters," Yates said after reading the note. "We should ride to Ely tomorrow." Madeline nodded, relieved yet apprehensive. "Will Frederick be there, in a cell, if the sheriff has any sense?" Yates assured her. "And I'll be with you every step of the way." The journey to Ely the next day was tense but uneventful. As they rode side by side, Madeline found herself drawing strength from Yates's steady presence. In the weeks since their first meeting, he had become her protector, her confidant, and increasingly, something more she wasn't ready to name. Sheriff Taylor greeted them at his office, Frederick's confiscated trunk already positioned prominently on his desk. "Miss Alcott, good to see you again under better circumstances," the sheriff said, tipping his hat. I need you to confirm this is your property before I can release it to you." Madeline examined the trunk, pointing out her initials carved discreetly on the bottom corner. Inside, she found her clothes, books, and personal items. Relief washed over her when she discovered a false bottom still intact in the lid, containing her father's correspondence. "These are my father's letters," she confirmed, carefully extracting the packet. "And yes, this is definitely my trunk." "That settles it then," Sheriff Taylor nodded. "Carruthers claimed you gave him the trunk as a gift, but I had my doubts. Man's a born liar if I ever met one." "Is he still in custody?" Yates asked, helping Madeline secure the letters in her satchel. "For now. Judge comes through next week." The sheriff frowned. "Though between us, I'm not sure the charges will stick. The man he drew on isn't pressing charges, suddenly came into some money and decided to leave town." He gave them a meaningful look. "Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Bribery," Yates muttered. "Carruthers is buying his way out of trouble." "Appears that way," Taylor agreed. "Miss Alcott, if you want to file theft charges regarding the trunk, that might keep him locked up longer." Madeline considered the option. Part of her wanted Frederick to face consequences for his actions, but another part simply wanted him out of her life forever. "If I file charges, would I need to remain in Nevada until the trial?" "Most likely," the sheriff confirmed. "Could be weeks, depending on the judge's circuit." She glanced at Yates, who remained silent, clearly leaving the decision to her. "Let me think on it," she told the sheriff. "For now, I'm just relieved to have my belongings back." After arranging to have the trunk delivered to the ranch, they thanked the sheriff and stepped onto Ely's dusty Main Street. The town was busier than when Madeline had first arrived, with miners and cowboys moving between the various establishments. "Are you hungry?" Yates asked. "We could get a meal at the hotel before heading back." Before Madeline could respond, a familiar and unwelcome voice called her name. Frederick stood across the street, apparently released on bail, his handsome features twisted with anger. "You think you've won, don't you?" he shouted, causing several passers-by to stop and stare. "Those papers are rightfully mine. We had an agreement." Yates stepped protectively in front of Madeline, but she moved to stand beside him instead. "There is no we anymore, Frederick," she called back firmly. "There never truly was. You're a fraud and a thief, and I want nothing more to do with you." Frederick's face flushed with rage. With alarming speed, he drew a pistol from his coat. "If I can't have what's mine, neither will you." Everything happened in a blur. Yates shoved Madeline aside as Frederick fired. She stumbled, falling hard against a hitching post. When she regained her footing, she saw Yates on one knee, his own weapon drawn, and Frederick clutching his shoulder, his pistol on the ground. "Yates," she cried, rushing to his side. "Are you hurt?" "Just winded," he assured her, rising slowly. "Carruthers is a poor shot, thankfully." Sheriff Taylor and several townspeople converged on Frederick, who was now moaning dramatically. The sheriff secured the dropped weapon and examined the wound. "Flesh wound," he announced. "He'll live to face attempted murder charges." He nodded to Yates. "Clean shooting, Donovan. You could have killed him." "Wasn't my intention," Yates replied grimly. "Just wanted to stop him before he hurt someone." As Frederick was escorted back to jail, this time with more serious charges pending, Madeline found herself trembling with delayed shock. Yates guided her to a nearby bench, his arm steady around her shoulders. "It's over," he murmured. "He can't hurt you now." "He could have killed you," she whispered, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. "It would take more than Frederick Carruthers to do that," Yates assured her, though she noticed him wince slightly as he moved. "You are hurt," she accused, pulling away to examine him better. "Just a graze," he admitted, showing her a tear in his jacket where a bullet had sliced the leather. "I've had much worse." The casual way he dismissed his injury only heightened Madeline's emotions. The thought of losing him, this man who had become so important to her in such a short time, was unbearable. Without thinking, she reached up to touch his face. "I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me," she said softly. Yates caught her hand, holding it against his cheek. "Nothing that has happened is because of you, Madeline. Carruthers made his choices." His eyes, intense and honest, held hers. "And I made mine when I decided to find you." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Around them, the town of Ely continued its business, oblivious to the profound shift occurring on that simple wooden bench. Finally, Yates released her hand, though reluctantly. "We should head back to the ranch. There's a storm coming." He glanced at the darkening western sky. The ride back was mostly silent, each lost in their thoughts. Occasionally their eyes would meet, and Madeline would feel that same flutter in her chest, stronger now than before. Something had changed in Ely, a threshold crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. They reached the ranch just as the first heavy raindrops began to fall. Mrs. Hodgson met them at the door, clucking with concern when she heard about the confrontation in town. She insisted on examining Yates's injury herself, despite his protests that it was minor. While Mrs. Hodgson tended to Yates, Madeline retreated to her room with her father's recovered letters. She spread them on the bed, carefully sorting through the correspondence. Most were business communications regarding investments in various mining operations throughout Nevada and California. Several contained maps and claim numbers, while others discussed potential yields and partnerships. One letter in particular caught her attention, dated just weeks before her father's unexpected death. In it, he mentioned a significant silver discovery in a mine near Virginia City, writing that the investment could secure Madeline's future for life, should anything happen to me. She was still studying the documents when a knock came at her door. It was Yates, now wearing a clean shirt, his expression serious. "Mrs. Hodgson said you might want this," he said, offering a cup of tea. "How are you feeling?" "Better, thank you." She accepted the tea and gestured to the letters spread across her bed. "I've been reading through my father's correspondence. There's something here, Yates, something potentially valuable." He entered, keeping a respectful distance. "May I?" She nodded, handing him the letter about the Virginia City mine. He read it carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The Comstock lode," he said finally. "Your father was an investor in one of the richest silver deposits ever discovered." He looked up at her, his expression incredulous. "Madeline, if these claims are legitimate and still valid, you could be an extremely wealthy woman." The implications washed over her. Financial independence, freedom to choose her own path, no need for a hasty marriage or dependent position. "No wonder Frederick was so desperate to get these back," she murmured. "This changes things," Yates said, returning the letter. "You'll need legal representation to assert your claims, and you'll need to travel to Virginia City to file the appropriate documents. Will you help me?" She asked, then quickly added, "I would compensate you for your time and expertise, of course." Something flickered in his eyes' disappointment. "Of course," he said formally, "as I promised." The sudden distance in his manner confused her. "Yates, what's wrong?" He shook his head, moving toward the door. "Nothing. It's been a long day and you need rest. We can discuss your plans tomorrow." Before she could question him further, he was gone, leaving Madeline to wonder what she had said to cause such a withdrawal. It wasn't until later, replaying their conversation, that she understood her offer of payment had suggested a business arrangement, not the deeper connection that had been growing between them. She had inadvertently pushed him away at the very moment she most wanted him close. The following morning brought clear skies and renewed purpose. Over breakfast, Madeline announced her intention to travel to Virginia City to investigate her father's mining claims, with Yates's assistance if he was willing. Mrs. Hodgson beamed her approval, while Yates maintained a polite but reserved demeanor. Virginia City is a 3-day journey, he informed her. The roads can be dangerous. You'd need an escort. I was hoping you would accompany me, Madeline said, meeting his eyes directly. Not as an employee, but as— She hesitated, searching for the right word. As a partner. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly. A partner, in this venture at least, she clarified. Your knowledge of mining operations would be invaluable, and I trust you, Yates, more than anyone else. The admission hung between them, loaded with meaning beyond the immediate discussion of mining claims. After a moment, he nodded. I'll need a few days to arrange things here at the ranch, he said. Miguel can oversee operations while we're gone. And so began a new chapter in their evolving relationship. The preparations for the journey occupied the next several days, with Yates teaching Madeline what to expect in the booming mining town of Virginia City. Together they studied her father's letters, piecing together the extent of his investments and forming a strategy to reclaim what was rightfully hers. During this time, the easy companionship they had established before the confrontation with Frederick gradually returned, though now tinged with a new awareness of each other. Casual touches, a hand brushing while passing papers, shoulders meeting as they bent over maps carried electricity. Conversations often trailed into comfortable silences filled with unspoken possibilities. The evening before their departure, Madeline found Yates on the porch, watching the sunset. She joined him at the railing, keenly aware of his presence beside her. Are you nervous about tomorrow? He asked, his voice low. A little, she admitted. Not about the journey, but about what we might discover. These claims could change my life entirely. For the better, surely, he observed. Madeline turned to face him. I'm not certain what better means anymore. She took a deep breath. When Frederick abandoned me at that trading post, I thought my life was over. All my plans, my future gone in an instant. I've never felt so lost. Yates remained silent, listening intently. But now, she continued, I realize it was the best thing that could have happened to me. She met his gaze directly. It led me here, to this place, to you. The admission hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Yates stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Madeline, he began, his voice rougher than usual. I should tell you. There you are. Mrs. Hodgson's cheerful voice interrupted whatever he had been about to say. Supper's on the table, and I've made your favorites for the journey tomorrow. The moment broken, they followed the housekeeper inside, exchanging glances that promised the conversation wasn't over, merely postponed. The journey to Virginia City proved more arduous than Madeline had anticipated. The terrain grew increasingly mountainous as they traveled, with steep inclines and narrow passes that tested her riding abilities. Nights were spent at roadside inns when available, or camping under the stars when necessary. Despite the physical challenges, Madeline found herself enjoying the adventure, especially with Yates as her companion and guide. On their final night before reaching Virginia City, they camped in a small clearing beside a stream. After a simple meal cooked over the campfire, they sat side by side, watching the flames dance against the gathering darkness. Tell me about your life before Nevada, Madeline requested, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the evening chill. Yates prodded the fire with a stick. Not much to tell that I haven't already shared. Born in Pennsylvania, joined the Union Army at 18. After the war, drifted west like so many others. And before the war, your family, he was quiet for a long moment. My father was a school teacher, believed in education, in books, in ideas. My mother died when I was young, so it was just the two of us for many years. A sad smile crossed his face. He didn't live to see the end of the war. Pneumonia took him while I was fighting at Gettysburg. I'm sorry, Madeline said softly, understanding all too well the pain of losing a parent. He would have liked you, Yates said unexpectedly. Strong-minded women always impressed him. He used to say my mother could debate politics better than any man in their county. The personal revelation touched Madeline deeply. And what about you? She asked. Do strong-minded women impress you, or do you prefer the more traditional sort? Yates turned to look at her, firelight reflecting in his eyes. I prefer authenticity, he said simply. In men, in women, in life, pretense is exhausting, and I've never had much patience for it. He studied her face. That's what struck me about you from the beginning. Even stranded at that trading post, you maintained your dignity, your true self. I was terrified, Madeline confessed, and furious, and humiliated. Yes, he agreed, but honest in all of it. Not hiding behind social niceties or false bravado. His understanding of her, even in that first meeting, was startling. Is that why you helped me? Because I was authentically distressed? She teased gently. Yates smiled, the expression warming his features. I helped you because Edward asked me to find you. I continued helping you because... He paused, searching for words. Because I discovered I couldn't imagine doing otherwise. The simple declaration made Madeline's heart race. Before she could respond, Yates stood, breaking the moment. We should get some rest, he said. Tomorrow will be a long day, and Virginia City can be overwhelming for first-time visitors. They retired to their separate bedrolls, positioned on opposite sides of the fire for propriety's sake. Despite her physical exhaustion, Madeline lay awake for hours, replaying Yates's words and wondering what might have followed had he completed his thought. Virginia City emerged from the mountains like a mirage, a bustling metropolis of wooden buildings clinging to the slopes of Mount Davidson. The streets teemed with activity as miners, merchants, and adventurers from every corner of the world pursued their fortunes in the shadow of the great Comstock lode. It's incredible, Madeline breathed as they rode down the main thoroughfare. I had no idea it would be so vibrant. Over 20,000 people live here now, Yates informed her, and more arriving every day. The silver mines have produced over $100 million in ore since the first strike. They secured rooms at the International Hotel, the finest accommodation in the city, according to Yates. After refreshing themselves from the journey, they set out to locate the mining commissioner's office. The commissioner, a harried-looking man named Hargrove, initially gave them little attention. But when Madeline presented her father's letters and claimed documents, his demeanor changed dramatically. Alcott, he repeated, examining the papers more carefully. As in Jonathan Alcott, the Boston investor, my father, Madeline confirmed. Hargrove whistled softly. Miss Alcott, these claims represent significant holdings. Your father was an early investor in the consolidated Virginia and California mines, two of the most productive in the Comstock. Are the claims still valid? Yates asked. The question Madeline was too nervous to voice. They appear to be, Hargrove said, consulting a large ledger. There's been some question about ownership since Mr. Alcott's death, but no one has been able to produce the original documents. He looked up at Madeline. Until now. What does this mean exactly? Madeline asked, trying to comprehend the implications. It means, Miss Alcott, that you are entitled to a percentage of these mines' production for the past 3 years, plus ongoing dividends. Hargrove calculated briefly on a piece of paper. Conservatively. We're talking about $50,000 in back payments, and potentially 5 to 10,000 annually moving forward, depending on production. The figures were staggering. Madeline gripped the edge of Hargrove's desk, feeling lightheaded. Yates placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You'll understand if Miss Alcott requires verification of these claims," he said to Hargrove, "and legal representation before proceeding." "Of course," the commissioner agreed. "I can recommend several reputable attorneys who specialize in mining law." After leaving the commissioner's office with copies of the relevant documents, Madeline and Yates walked in stunned silence back toward the hotel. The bustling street, the grand buildings, even the mountain itself seemed transformed by the knowledge that Madeline now had a significant stake in the wealth being extracted from its depths. $50,000, she said finally, the sum still incomprehensible. "Yates, I never imagined." "Your father was a shrewd investor," he replied, "and you're fortunate the documentation survived." "Thanks to you," she reminded him. "If you hadn't found me at that trading post." She shuddered, imagining what might have happened had Frederick succeeded in his scheme. Yates guided her to a small cafe, recognizing her need to sit and process this new reality. Over coffee, they discussed next steps: hiring an attorney, establishing proper documentation, securing the funds in a reputable bank. "You'll need to remain in Virginia City for at least a week while these matters are settled," Yates said. "After that, you'll be free to—" he hesitated, "to go wherever you choose." The implication was clear. With her newfound wealth, Madeline could return east, continue to California, or venture anywhere her heart desired. The options were both liberating and terrifying. "What would you do?" she asked, watching his face carefully. "If you suddenly had the means to go anywhere, be anyone?" Yates considered the question seriously. "I'd probably do exactly what I did when I mustered out of the army," he said finally. "Find a piece of land that spoke to me and build something lasting on it, even after Emily left." The question was bold, perhaps too personal, but Madeline needed to understand. "Her leaving didn't change what I wanted," Yates said quietly. "Only who I thought I might share it with." The answer resonated with Madeline in unexpected ways. Her journey west had been motivated by a desire for security and companionship with Frederick, a man who, she now realized, she had never truly known. Yet here was Yates, a man she had known for mere weeks, but understood on a fundamental level that transcended time. That evening, after consulting with a recommended attorney who confirmed the validity of her claims, Madeline stood on the balcony of her hotel room, gazing out at the lights of Virginia City. A soft knock at her door revealed Yates, still dressed from dinner, his expression serious. "May I come in?" he asked. "I have something important to discuss." She welcomed him, leaving the door ajar for propriety's sake. He remained standing, seemingly uncertain how to begin. "I've been thinking about your situation," he said finally. "About what happens after we return to the ranch." Madeline's heart quickened. "And, with your inheritance secured, you'll have no need to remain in Nevada." He spoke carefully, as if each word cost him effort. "You could return to Boston or continue to San Francisco as you originally planned. Is that what you think I should do?" She asked, watching him closely. Yates ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of discomfort. "It doesn't matter what I think. This is your decision, your life." "It matters to me," Madeline said softly. "Your opinion matters greatly." He met her gaze then, the careful neutrality slipping to reveal emotion she couldn't quite name. "Madeline, he stopped, visibly gathering himself. "I can't advise you on this, not objectively." "Why not?" "Because I want you to stay," he admitted, the words tumbling out as if he couldn't contain them any longer. "At the ranch, with me. And that's selfish." The confession hung between them, honest and vulnerable, Madeline felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly overwhelmed her. "Is it selfish to want happiness?" she asked, stepping closer to him. "To want to build something lasting with someone who understands you?" Hope flickered in his eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that wealth doesn't change what truly matters," Madeline said, finding courage in his vulnerability. "When Frederick abandoned me at that trading post, I thought my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning." She reached for his hand, twining her fingers with his. "I'm saying that I've found something in Nevada, something unexpected and precious, and I'm not ready to leave it behind." Yates tightened his grip on her hand. "Madeline, I need to be clear. I'm asking you to consider a life with me, not as my guest or partner, but as my wife." The directness of his proposal took her breath away, not because it was unexpected, but because it articulated what her heart had known for weeks. "Yes," she said simply. "That is precisely what I want." Joy transformed his features, erasing the careful restraint he'd maintained for so long. He drew her closer, one hand gently cupping her cheek. "I've wanted to do this since I found you at that trading post," he murmured, before lowering his lips to hers. The kiss was tender at first, then deepening with a passion that left Madeline breathless. When they finally parted, she rested her forehead against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "We should probably close the door before the entire hotel witnesses our engagement," she suggested with a smile. Yates laughed, the sound rich and uninhibited. "Mrs. Hodgson would never forgive us for scandalizing Virginia City." Nevertheless, he moved to close the door, returning to take both her hands in his. "We'll do this properly. Return to the ranch, announce our intentions, give you time to be certain." "I am certain," Madeline assured him. "But I appreciate the gesture." They spent the remainder of the evening planning their future, not just the wedding, but the life they would build together. With Madeline's inheritance, they could expand the ranch, improve the breeding stock, perhaps even build a larger house. More importantly, they could create the home that both had longed for in different ways. The following week passed in a whirlwind of legal consultations, banking arrangements, and excited planning. Madeline's claims were verified, the back payments secured in a reputable bank, and arrangements made for future dividends. With each passing day, her decision to remain in Nevada with Yates felt more right, more inevitable. On their final night in Virginia City, they celebrated with dinner at the finest restaurant in town. Across the table, Madeline studied the face of the man who had so unexpectedly become central to her life. "What are you thinking?" Yates asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "That fate has a curious sense of humor," she replied. "If Frederick hadn't abandoned me, if you hadn't been looking for me, if my father hadn't invested in these mines." She shook her head. "So many pieces had to align for us to be sitting here now." "I don't believe it was fate," Yates said thoughtfully. "At least, not entirely. We made choices, you to trust me that day at the trading post, me to follow through on my promise to Edward. Those choices led us here, not some predetermined path." "Perhaps you're right," Madeline conceded. "Though I can't help feeling that we were somehow meant to find each other." Yates reached across the table, taking her hand. "However it happened, I'm grateful. The journey back to the ranch was considerably lighter in spirit than their departure had been." Free from uncertainty about her future and secure in her decision to build a life with Yates, Madeline found herself noticing the beauty of the Nevada landscape with new appreciation. The stark mountains, the sweeping valleys, the endless sky, all of it now represented home in a way Boston never had. Mrs. Hodgson greeted their return with barely contained excitement, having intuited the change in their relationship even before they announced their engagement. "I knew it," she declared, embracing Madeline warmly. "From the moment he brought you here, I told Maria there was something special between you two." The ranch hands offered their congratulations more reservedly, but with evident sincerity. Miguel, in particular, seemed pleased, confiding to Madeline that the boss had been too alone for too long. In the weeks that followed, Madeline threw herself into preparations for their wedding and her permanent life at the ranch. She ordered furniture and household goods from San Francisco, began sketching plans for expanding the main house, and even started learning Spanish from Maria to better communicate with some of the ranch hands. Most importantly, she sent a long, detailed letter to Edward, explaining everything that had transpired since his telegram had first reached her in Boston. His reply came 2 weeks later, a warmly worded blessing of her engagement and a promise to attend the wedding, along with his wife, in the spring. On a crisp autumn evening, 6 months after being abandoned at the Ely trading post, Madeline stood on the porch of what was now truly her home. The setting sun bathed the landscape in golden light, highlighting the changes already underway, a new wing being added to the house, improved fencing for the expanded herds, a small orchard recently planted near the creek. She felt Yates's presence before his arms encircled her from behind, drawing her against his chest. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "Completely," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "Though I was just thinking how different my life might have been. Regrets?" There was no insecurity in his question, only genuine interest. Madeline turned in his arms to face him. "Not one," she said firmly. "Frederick did me a favor that day, though he never intended to." Yates smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Remind me to thank him if our paths ever cross again." "I doubt they will," Madeline said. "The sheriff's last letter mentioned he left Nevada after serving his sentence, headed for San Francisco with some scheme about importing exotic goods." "His loss," Yates said simply, bending to kiss her. "My endless gain." The ranch continued to prosper under their joint stewardship. Madeline's financial acumen, honed through managing her inheritance, complemented Yates's practical knowledge of ranching operations. Together, they expanded both the cattle herds and the horse breeding program, establishing a reputation for quality that spread throughout Nevada and beyond. Spring brought Edward and his wife Martha to the ranch for a wedding that combined Eastern refinement with Western practicality. Madeline wore a gown ordered from San Francisco, but the ceremony took place under the cottonwood trees beside the creek, with ranch hands and neighboring families in attendance alongside the few society friends Edward had brought from Boston. "Your father would be proud," Edward told Madeline after the ceremony, his eyes misty. "Not just of the fortune you've secured, but of the life you've built here, of the woman you've become." "Thank you for sending Yates to find me," she replied, embracing her godfather tightly. "It was the greatest gift anyone has ever given me," Edward chuckled. "I merely asked him to ensure your safety. Finding you a husband was his own initiative." He glanced across the gathering to where Yates was speaking with Martha. "Though I can't say I'm disappointed with the outcome." As the celebration continued into the evening, Madeline found a moment alone with her new husband near the same porch where they had spent so many evenings during her early days at the ranch. "Mrs. Donovan," Yates said, testing the name with evident pleasure. "How does it feel?" "Perfect," Madeline replied honestly. "As if I've finally found where I belong." "With me?" he asked, drawing her closer. "With you," she confirmed, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "Always with you." The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. The ranch weathered drought, harsh winters, and fluctuating cattle prices. Madeline's mining investments continued to provide financial security, though the Comstock's production eventually declined as the richest veins were exhausted. Their family grew with the birth of a son, Jonathan, named for Madeline's father, followed 2 years later by a daughter they called Elizabeth after Yates's mother. The children thrived in the freedom of ranch life, developing the same love for the land that their parents shared. On the 10th anniversary of her arrival at the trading post, Madeline and Yates returned to Ely. The town had grown, though not as dramatically as Virginia City in its heyday. The trading post where they had first met still stood, now expanded and modernized. "It looks so different," Madeline observed as they entered, "yet somehow the same." The current proprietor, learning of their connection to the place, insisted on showing them the exact spot where Madeline had stood that fateful day, waiting with her single valise after being abandoned. "Hard to believe it's been 10 years, Yates remarked as they left, heading toward the hotel for lunch. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday." "And sometimes," Madeline replied, "it feels as if I've always been with you, as if my life before the trading post was someone else's story." They paused outside the hotel, watching the activity on the main street. Miners and cowboys still dominated the scene, but there were more families now, more permanent structures, signs of a community putting down roots rather than simply chasing fortune. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if I hadn't found you that day?" Yates asked, a question he'd never voiced before. Madeline considered it seriously. "I imagine I would have found work in town, perhaps as a teacher, eventually made my way to California or back east." She smiled up at him. "But I wouldn't have found this happiness, this contentment. You were the catalyst for everything good in my life, Yates." He shook his head, drawing her close. "You had it backwards from the beginning, Madeline. You were never the one being rescued." His voice dropped to a whisper meant only for her. "I was looking for you, yes, but I didn't know I was also looking for myself, for home, for purpose. You gave me all of that and more." As they entered the hotel, arm in arm, Madeline reflected on the strange, winding path that had led her to this moment. Being abandoned at the trading post had seemed like the end of her dreams. Instead, it had been merely the beginning of a far greater adventure than she could have imagined, one filled with love, family, and the profound satisfaction of building a life with the right partner by her side. Later that night, back at the ranch with their children tucked safely in bed, Madeline and Yates sat on the porch that had witnessed so many important moments in their relationship. The Nevada sky stretched endlessly above them, brilliant with stars. "I've been thinking," Yates said, his voice comfortable in the darkness, "about expanding again. There's land available to the north that would give us better access to water during dry years." "The Harrington property?" Madeline asked, familiar with his vision for the ranch's future. "Yes. Jonathan will need room to build his own operation eventually." He squeezed her hand. "If that's what he wants, of course. He's his father's son," Madeline observed with a smile. "Land speaks to him the way it speaks to you." They sat in companionable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, distant lowing of cattle, the soft nickering of horses in the pasture, the gentle rush of the creek that had sustained them through good years and bad. "I never thanked you properly," Madeline said suddenly. "For finding me that day, for saying those words that changed everything." Yates turned to her, the lines in his face softened by moonlight. "Which words were those?" "I've been looking for you," she quoted, the phrase as clear in her memory as the moment he had spoken it. Little did I know how true that would prove to be, how completely we would find each other. He drew her into his arms, his embrace as secure and comforting as it had been from the beginning. "And how thankful I am, every day, that we did." In that moment, under the vast Nevada sky, Madeline knew with absolute certainty that being abandoned at that trading post had not been an ending, but the beginning of the greatest journey of her life, a journey of love, partnership, and belonging that continued to unfold with each passing day.